things that he wants. It's interesting to see how he's approaching it.
Yeah, someone broke into Pathways and a few months ago, trashed the place, stole some things. The community
Yeah.
and the donors stepped right up. And they were still doing some repairs when I was there a month later.
Okay.
But they missed one day of service.
And they just got back up. That's
They
awesome.
had people into work because
Okay, you all set?
Resilient.
Yeah, I guess so.
it's in a good place.
That's
We'll
amazing.
be opening on camera 2,
Right.
so watch the light.
Watch for
Here
the
we
light.
go. And 7, 6, 5, 4.
Hello, and help me welcome our guests from Cornerstone, Ellen and Neil. I'd like to hear about your stories and what you're doing for Cornerstone and for the people of New Hampshire.
Sure. Carl, thanks so much for having us on. We appreciate it. I suppose one of the most exciting things we've been doing this spring was what we call our Concord 101 presentation. And it really just started out as a beta test because we will run them again this fall, right ahead of the legislative session. But what we found was there was so much hunger coming back at us from churches where we would do this presentation that we just kind of filled out a whole schedule this spring doing this 2-hour seminar that gives both a biblical rationale for why believers should care about what's going on in state government, and then we also just shared a lot of practicals about how accessible state government is in New Hampshire.
I think that's something that's needed for a lot of people.
People are
that's one of
surprised.
the reasons we have the show.
Yes.
People are
Yeah.
surprised
need
when
help.
I tell them how open state government is. I have been involved on the advocacy side of Cornerstone for many years, so the State House is familiar to me. But when you go to Boston or go to Hartford and then come back to Concord, you can see the difference. There's no professional politicians in Concord, they're your neighbors. There's no security to go through when you walk in. It's like coming home. It's a very welcoming, open thing. And this year was the State House's 200th anniversary, so Concord 101's given me a chance to talk about that too. But everywhere we've gone, we meet people who love New Hampshire. This is their home. They want to learn more about how to get involved. It's a very exciting program.
Somewhat unique too
Yes.
in this country.
And I think when I think about kind of the overall effect, when Ellen and I have come, sometimes Shannon, our executive director, has come, and when we do our Concord 101 presentation, and it's interactive, so it's not just us being talking heads, but I feel like the two things we're exporting, if you will, are hope and practicals. You know, people want hope as our culture is really being deconstructed so quickly. People want hope that there's hope to speak into government and some of the mechanisms that direct our culture. And then, of course, what Ellen brings so well are the practicals on how we can get involved, what our best courses of action are with communicating with legislators or being involved in the legislative process. So I'd say the overall effectiveness of Concord 101 has been hope and then some practicals.
Yeah, getting rid of hand-wringing. I've always thought that part of my job with Cornerstone is to eliminate people saying, oh, I don't know what to do. Sure, there are things you can do, very practical, and whether you're promoting something or trying to put the brakes on something that might not be so constructive, there are good ways to do it and people to work with.
Can you give us some examples of what you tell people? Or?
Well, I'm thinking in particular of a bill this year that would have affected families' education choice. And with a coalition, which is very important, working with a broad variety of New Hampshire people, making sure parents who are concerned about this know who their legislators are, feel at home in the State House, understand that bringing kids is not a problem in the State House, bringing them to hearings, and how speaking to a committee sounds scary at first. I remember I was shaking in my shoes the first time I did it. But remember, you're talking to neighbors. If you can keep it brief and clear, and remember you're talking to neighbors, you'll get your point across, and you'll inspire the people behind you waiting to testify. It doesn't have to be a scary thing.
No, that's pretty good. I think that's good advice for people because a lot of people are very new to the thing. They think it's something they see on TV and somebody's going to be yelling at you or whatever.
Oh, that's very different from... Neil's had experience testifying in Boston and can tell you the difference.
Yeah, it feels like, the difference between the Massachusetts State House and the New Hampshire State House experience couldn't be more clear, and that, Massachusetts, a wonderful state. I mean, the Commonwealth has a lot of incredible history, but at this moment, I would say, when a citizen comes to testify, I mean, it's one thing to be on the wrong side of a cultural issue, so to speak, but they're kind of elevated. It's a professional legislature, and my own experience there has been rather intimidating, rather. You just feel like you're they're up there and you're down here. Contrast that with New Hampshire, where everyone's on the same level. It really is a citizen legislature. Legislators are just getting paid $100 a year, and as Ellen is so fond of saying, you're talking to your neighbor, and there's neighbors there, and even if you don't see eye to eye with the chair or with even the majority of the committee, they give you your time. It's understood that they're going to stay there until everyone has shared their piece.
That education one was an example. There were so many families wanting to testify that after the hearing was done for the day, the chairman or the chairwoman rescheduled another hearing so that more people could be heard from. She was caught by surprise by the crowd, but that's what you do in New Hampshire.
Yeah,
when that many families,
waiting to come in, and sometimes we have to use the 400-seat house.
And really, how exciting is that when people take time out of their day, time out of their work, bring their kids, just to make sure legislators hear firsthand what's going on. Our state is so open to that.
And they should know, too, that I've served 4 terms up there, and getting along with my hierarchy, I guess you would say, was very friendly, too. There's no real fights going on or anything like that.
Well, many of you come with the background of working in your own community, so you know what it's like.
Yeah, but not everybody. I mean, I didn't come from that, and, but I came from a business area where there was some tough discussions, let's say, in our board of directors, but this is fairly friendly. I mean, you do have some opinionated people, but it doesn't get nasty.
Well, I think 80% of the work gets done in the hallways in conversations, and that's something else that we talk about in Concord 101, is the importance of not seeing your legislators as out there somewhere, but neighbors that you can get a relationship with, because you see them at the soccer games, at the grocery store, what have you. And how the conversations you have outside the hearing room, I think, can be just as important as what goes on in the hearing. And one of the things that we see again and again on the faces of the people who come to Concord 101 is when they realize that the hearings aren't so scary.
Right.
Because building the relationship outside of the State House, that's where you lay the foundation with a legislator.
And I don't think they have to be afraid of the people that are political from the standpoint of being a paid lawyer to back up a certain thing. They're fairly reasonable. I never had a complex.
I'm one of the ones who wears that orange badge because I
right.
represent Cornerstone on the advocacy side. But my job is to ask a lot more than I talk. My job is to learn. And that's not a bad way to go into a conversation in the State House.
Now you're teaching them.
Well, didn't this start? Pastors, Neil's job has been on the education side of Cornerstone, and he's had encounters with a lot of pastors. And the pastors were saying, what can we tell people who come to us to say they're concerned about this or that that's happening? The pastors themselves are busy. They have a full plate, but they want to know where to send people.
Sure.
And they have been good enough to open their churches to welcome us. It ends up being roundtable conversation, question and answer. It reinforces my love for this state. I've been here all my adult life, but also I think everybody in the room leaves knowing more than they came with.
And I think our format is very empowering.
Yeah.
We the basic plan for the Concord 101 is 4 main half-an-hour blocks. The first one being just a biblical rationale. The New Testament especially paints such a picture of an honor of civil government and the fact that we should be engaged. And so we go through that. And even as we, consistent with how we empower people politically, we don't tell people what to believe. We just present, here are the scriptures, read them for yourselves. The picture that's painted is a high esteem for civil government and civil government as a part of God's plan for creation. we hit that first. I hit that part. Second, Ellen will just share about how unique New Hampshire is. Some of the things she's already hit on in our show today, just how accessible it is, and just how incredibly local it is. And I'll let her share on that a little bit. Our third move is just to talk about then how an idea becomes a law in New Hampshire, and then where a citizen can best communicate their concerns or their approval in that process, because there's certain points where, like, coming to Concord, coming to the hearings are so important, and just communicating to people this is important, and that's why being in touch with Cornerstone is important, and other advocacy organizations on issues they care about too, so that when we kind of send the alarm and say, hey, here's when this hearing is, it's not just because we like sending alarms. We're just saying now's the moment for you to
Now's your
act and
time,
speak.
yeah.
And then we end usually with Ellen gives a great update on just current issues and where we're at, how people can best pray, and how they can communicate with their legislators at this moment on specific issues. So those are kind of our 4 main areas.
So you do touch about them contacting their
Yes.
local
Absolutely.
legislator and actually looking into writing some legislation to solve their problem.
Thing, if you have an idea or if you have a concern, you take it to the legislator. This is, how many things did you see in Concord that came up because it was a concern from people
Oh, yeah.
in your town or in a district? We want to make sure people understand that a legislator won't know to advocate for you if they don't know what your needs are.
Yeah, and they have to understand the little things that you see missing in the legislation, that they may not have caught, but it's something very important to you anyway about being able to participate or not
Yes.
participate in something.
And something that's important about New Hampshire that surprises people is that you don't have a staff. The House members do not have staff. So you, as a citizen, you with your knowledge of a particular issue, you with your knowledge of whether it's homeschooling or healthcare, you are a resource for a legislator. And that is something else that you see the oh wow moment on
Yeah.
people's faces.
Yeah, they welcome that kind
Yeah.
of information.
Yeah, and I'd say, since our Concord 101, I can probably count on one hand the number of people who've come to us and said, I have this idea. And, we can kind of coach them thinking that is, potentially that's a great, there's a hole in the RSAs right now. You should talk to your representative. Why don't you talk to them and see if this is a good idea for a law?
You pick up the phone and I tell them you're not getting an office, you're probably getting the cell phone. That's
Yeah,
what the
right.
legislators put on their site. Or you're talking to their family and say, here's my idea, can I have a couple of minutes of your time, or can I sit down for coffee? Easy stuff.
Well, how do they get in touch with you if they want to hear some of the stories?
Our website
Yeah.
is nhcornerstone.org, and on that site you have the opportunity to sign up for the Pastors and Leaders newsletter, which is what Neil works on, and on the legislative update. Between January and June, my job is to prepare once a week a summary of legislation. What's its status? When is the hearing? And if the hearing's over, who should you contact? And if people want more information, they can reach out to us. But our website, nhcornerstone.org, is a good background for the organization and for the issues we do. And if you sign up for our newsletters, we will make sure you have the information you need.
Well, that's great, because there are a lot of pieces of legislation. I don't think people realize how many bills go through.
Yeah.
And some of them are not very well written.
And some of them we don't catch the significance of until they're in process,
Right.
but we're nimble.
Yeah.
Well, both of you sound like you have some jobs, really. I mean, I know how many pieces I try to go through.
But it's work that I love. I was a mom, an activist mom for a long time, bringing my kids to Concord. Those days are over, but the activism remains,
There you
and
go.
it's
Keep
very
it up.
exciting.
Pass it on.
Yeah.
Because we all need leaders like that.
It's true. And Carl, I was going to say that's probably one of the 3 or 4 major aha moments during our Concord 101s is when people realize, Ellen, Cornerstone, we only know what's coming a week ahead.
That's
Between
right, when the
January and
calendar
June, we only know on Thursday night, and we usually take Friday to process kind of strategy so that Saturday morning we send out our legislative update telling people, here's when these hearings are, please come when you can. So it's not the most convenient. Democracy is at times slow / cumbersome / not convenient. But it's the system we have, and it's a great one, and it's you know, and we can be involved. So we pass along that info as soon as we can. But again, most people are surprised that we only know a week ahead, and you know, to ask someone to come to Concord and take a half day or day off,
Right.
it's
It's a commitment.
yeah, it can be burdensome, but it's so worth it. You know, on some of these issues that really affect a lot of people, we want people to be able to
Yeah,
come.
and the committees there really want to find out if there's some problem in there.
Yes, they want to know before
yeah.
it goes into
That's
an
right,
executive
'cause
session.
It's harder to fix it afterwards, even if it's something they're going to have questions from the Senate
Mm-hmm.
after they pass it on. You know, if they haven't taken something, or
Yeah.
why is the Senate interested in this? We never even heard about it.
Well, this
Yeah.
has been something that we started out with just a few churches. More have invited us. Now we're scheduling into the fall, where people who come, who live in New Hampshire and primarily are on the pastoral side, the minister side, are seeing, oh, this isn't a wall
Right.
between what happens in Concord and what happens in my congregation, but there are things we can do to work together. There are people who want to learn. We can do it. We've traveled all over the state. We look forward to traveling more. And Cornerstone will speak with anyone who'd like to listen about
Okay.
civic engagement
Good.
and learning more about the process, not just about the policies in particular, but just making the process less of a mystery and help people understand just how open it is.
And the both of you are the only ones that are pushing this? It sounds like you must be running around too like crazy.
Well, we have an executive. Cornerstone is a lean operation.
Right, I know
we,
that.
We
Good.
want to we want to honor be good stewards
But do you
of our
need extra
supporters.
help in any of this?
You know what I tell you, Carl? We've had a few people out of Concord 101 and out of another one of our summer-fall strategy involves
Yes.
breakfast mainly for pastors or leadership like elders and deacons in churches. And out of both those and the Concord 101s, we've had several people say, can I please volunteer? To which I say, yes, let's figure out your skill set
Good,
and
good.
let's have a good match. And so that's been fun. I wanted to comment on just a little bit a while ago, we talked about the hearings, and you'd mentioned, you know, how people share their stories. You know, one of the things that we found during the Concord 101s is we've had several current and former reps attend,
Yes.
like yourself, and all of them have said they do remember the stories that are shared during the testimony. And we had a couple say, and some of them actually changed my mind on a certain issue.
Yeah.
So we just like to, you know, before our very eyes, in the middle of the Concord 101, you have reps saying, your stories matter. And that's just, we are so appreciative of that sentiment, and it's why we want to invite people
Yes.
to testify, because those stories shared in the committee hearings, they are effective.
And people can bring some extra information with them that they could leave with the committee if they want some details that
Yes.
somebody would like to look at the leisure.
That's something I try to tell people. You do not need to, if you have 50 pages of information, you don't sit and try to read it.
That's right.
You give your story, you keep it brief, and you say, I have documentation here, please read this. It becomes part of the formal record,
Yeah.
and that way people can look at it. And when it gets to the other chamber, then the
Yeah.
people there can
Get
look
to
at
look
it.
at it too,
So
yeah.
your expertise, your experience can be passed on.
And you should also tell them, too, that they can have hearings at both the House and the Senate.
Oh, yes.
They can go to both of those.
Yeah.
And even though the Senate's smaller, I don't think it's any different.
You know, you see legislators, both House and Senate, they come and go during the hearing, and if you don't know the New Hampshire House, you might think, that's rude.
Yeah.
But they have multiple committees
That's right.
on which to serve. They might have to testify on one of their own bills. So they really do rely on the information you provide in writing, because perhaps they didn't hear you testify, but they can look at what you submit.
That's especially true in the Senate.
Yes.
As you say, some of them serve on 3 or 4
Yeah.
committees.
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
I
I don't know
think
if I ever wanted to run for the Senate.
And you know, while the Senate is a somewhat more formal structure than the House, there's still an easygoing sense
yeah.
with, if you have a job to do, go ahead and do it. I want people to walk into the State House and think, oh boy, instead of, oh dear. When I see people walk in with confidence, I know that we've done our job.
And they have sessions too up there where they have tried to educate the people in some particular thing, because they know it's a very complex issue or that they bring people in that everybody can hear, outside experts in certain areas.
I know that's particularly true in the budget and finance.
Definitely.
To
Yeah,
do
I
that, which is
noticed.
as many times as I've been in Concord, the budget is still
It's
a
very
big
complex.
process, a very big
The
complex
worst bill I have
process.
to look at is HB2.
There you go. That's
That is a beast.
every 2 years. That's
Every 2
that one's a
years,
beast.
It has all the details and how they're going to charge me.
But you can see how much we've enjoyed it, and it's not just
Yeah.
because we're doing this for Cornerstone. We love the work.
Mm-hmm.
We love the travel. We love meeting people, learning something new about
Oh.
the state all the time, and hearing people's questions.
That's what you need to be. a
Because
good
if I'm a
teacher.
keyboard warrior, my own thoughts will keep me going, but that only goes so far.
Uh-huh.
You really need to be in
Yeah.
touch with what people hear what they need, what their needs are.
So
and
they should
respond to that.
contact you by website and
Yeah.
talk to you and see whether they can help or whether
We
they
also have a
problem.
Facebook page, Cornerstone
okay.
Action. I believe that the Facebook page is called Cornerstone Action. And on that, you'll find links to many of the videos
Mm-hmm.
that we have produced where people are telling their stories.
Tell me about that. I know you had videos. And
Oh, my.
Oh gosh, it's been a huge venture. Actually, we had a great time. We wanted to capture some stories on video because in these debates that become so divisive. I think of a lot of the gender debates, or of course just where Ellen cut her teeth in pro-life. And there's so many ways that our culture is so polarized, and we felt the need to speak into the culture, not just purely on this piece of legislation or that, but let's tell stories. And so we've had some wonderful stories about, when I say wonderful, I mean gripping,
Touching.
effective, touching. We have 2 women who are formerly trafficked, human
really?
human trafficking victims who also each have their own story regarding abortion. We have Jeffrey, a formerly transgender woman, meaning he's a biological man. He lived as a woman for 20 years, but then really had this encounter with God and decided he needed to go back to living the way that God had created him as a man. And so we have his story, which is really gripping. In fact, that story has now over 600,000 views.
We never expected it to
Wow.
get that kind of traction, but
Wow.
his
Yeah.
story has gotten out, and people are reaching out to him.
That's what we love. When we can connect people who are struggling or people who are wrestling with different things, we can connect them to people who've been a few steps ahead. That's why we wanted to tell Jasmine's story, why we wanted to tell Darlene's story. These are 2 human trafficking victims. Why we wanted to tell Jeffrey's story. We have a few more lined up, but those are all on our YouTube channel.
No kidding.
So
Very
either
good.
like Ellen mentioned on the Facebook page, but also on our YouTube channel,
NH
NH Cornerstone. If you look at the Truth and Love, those videos, that's where we're telling these stories. And then we also have a whole other campaign called For the People. And that's where we have a couple of pastors share just how important it is for the church to care about civil government. And I just love, they just have these 90 seconds.
Every Friday, a new one comes out
Oh, really?
with a different message,
Yeah.
but it's always from someone with a pastoral viewpoint, with something interesting to say. I learn from them.
Yeah, I do
look
too.
forward to them.
And I think honestly their perspectives are so helpful. So we have Representative Alan Cook, a former rep from Rockingham, and he's also a pastor of Grace Ministries International in Brentwood. He shares these little zingers that are awesome, as does Mark Warren, who's the pastor of Grace Capital in Pembroke. And they just have a great understanding of how important civil government is. So
Well, I'm glad you told me of that. That
Yeah.
sounds interesting for our audience, too.
We
They
have
should-
that in our weekly newsletter to the Pastors and Leaders Network. It's also, all the videos go up on our Facebook page as well.
Oh,
And anything that goes out, if there's questions or people want more information, let us
Yeah.
know.
and you have lots of it.
yeah, only because stuff comes at us so quickly. I wanted to share one other thing that's been really fun, and that is because I just was thinking about aha moments. And every quarter we invite pastors, leaders to tour the State House. And it's actually, this tour is led by 2, one's a former rep, Alan Cook, and one is a current rep, Mark Pearson. And they're also pastors, and so they kind of give the tour. And just sharing the history of the State House, but also we go into the various chambers, we take a moment to pray. We go into the Legislative Office building right behind the State House, just west of the State House, and we look at what the hearing process is like. And what's always fun is I think that from 1/3 to 1/2, every time we've run this, we've run it 4 times now, again, every quarter, and 1/3 to 1/2 of the pastors have never been in the State House before. And I love that we introduce them to the State House.
Very
And
good.
I love that they come away with at very least a burden to pray, and at most a
They've
lot
met
of them.
the governor the last time you presented the governor.
Yep, we
with
shared
the
it.
Founder's Bible.
Exactly. We shared a Founder's Bible with the governor. He wrote me back saying that he keeps it right next to his desk. And there's always I find the governor very friendly,
Yeah.
very
Oh,
affable.
very good.
Yeah, he's just such a good leader. And so, I know he enjoys connecting
Mm-hmm.
with pastors and leaders. So it's always a fun time.
I enjoy having him on too, because he likes to talk about his plans.
He's
and
full
stuff.
of energy and
That's right.
and
That's what we need, though.
Yeah.
We need more people.
no
to
one should ever
participate.
feel reluctant to
Right.
reach out to him
Right, right.
because I really think he enjoys that.
Yeah, it's not an awe-inspiring thing, but it's interesting and it's easy to get along with as long as you are willing to try.
And he's interested in people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something that, we all bring ourselves with us when we go to the State House, whether we're elected or whether we work there. But the ones who have staying power are the ones who are interested in other people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you can't do that if you walk into the State House afraid of it or feeling overwhelmed. But if you walk in, if you go through those doors with a sense of confidence, like this is my State House, then you're willing
Yeah.
to reach out for conversation.
Have you been able to encourage anybody to run for office?
We shall see next
Yeah.
June.
Oh,
It's
really?
something we talk about every
Because
time we
I
have
think,
Concord
that,
101.
you get those people that get inspired and that know it can work.
We always
You
let
want it
people
there.
know, watch out for June 2020.
Right.
That is the filing period, and now is the time to begin discerning, is this something I should do?
And if you don't participate in the state, at least participate in your local
Yes.
Yes.
offices. Because that might be easier because you have a job or something to do your meetings at night rather than the daytime.
Yeah.
But even a lot of people have a job that are in the legislature.
Yeah.
It takes planning. It takes
That's right.
it takes a lot of support from your family and your neighborhood. But yeah, it can be done. And going local, as you said, it's a good way to get to know your own home better.
That's right. And get out and talk to the people.
Yeah.
Start with it that
Yes.
way.
Carl, I was going to say on recruitment, one of the conversations that I have with pastors is the power of their voice because they're shepherding their people, they're discipling their people, they can see the different giftings in the congregation or the parish. I encourage them, if you see someone that has just even a smidgen of
Very
leadership
good.
or,
That's
or
right.
like Ellen just shared, a desire to love on people, they're often great candidates for either state rep or, like you've said, school board or library, trustees. So the pastor's voice is very important in calling people out kind of to their best selves,
That's
and
right.
I encourage them that way.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks
It's
for
a very
having us.
interesting story that you put up. And good luck in your future.
Thanks.
Thank
Come
you.
back if you have something new to talk about.
We'd
Thanks
love
for
to.
having
Okay?
us.
Thank you again. And thank you for listening in.